for this section, we're going to simplify complex fractions. So complex fractions are a fraction over a fraction. So in this case, what you want to do, so here we have a plus 1 over x all over a minus 1 over x. So you want to get this as one fraction and this as one fraction first. So you go back to how we add and subtract. So for this, our common denominator is x, so this is over 1. Didn't really leave enough room, but let me see if I can write it like this. So we're going to multiply this by x and this by x. So that's going to give us a times x plus 1, because this one already has the x, all divided by x. So we've just added this here, over, for our bottom. Again, the common denominator is x, so this is over 1. So we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by x. So we're going to have ax minus 1 all over x. So that's step 1, is if it's not a fraction over a fraction, then add or subtract to make it that way. And then what we're going to do is this fraction bar just means division. So a lot of times we'll say ax plus 1 over x, but really it means division. So how do you divide fractions? You keep the first one the same, switch to multiplication, and then flip the second one. So the same thing as when we were dividing before, it's just now it's written as a complex fraction instead of a division problem. Or instead of using the division symbol, it's written as a fraction. So keep the top one the same, switch to multiplication, and flip, do the reciprocal of the bottom. And then simplify, so our x's cancel. This is a plus, this is a minus, so you can't do anything with that. So your answer is ax plus 1 over ax minus 1. And again, for these, we're assuming that the denominators are not going to be 0. So for the next problem here, so this one's already a fraction, so we don't have to worry about it. This has a minus 1 stuck out here, so we want to write it as one fraction. So this is 1 over 1. Our common denominator is m plus 1. So we're going to multiply this times m plus 1 and this times m plus 1. So we're going to have m minus, and make sure you watch here because it's minus, and just like before, don't lose the negative. Minus, if you want to write 1 times m plus 1, that's fine. All over m plus 1. All over this bottom fraction. So that's going to simplify. Let me simplify the numerator first. You've got minus 1, so this is, if you switch this to a plus, this is a minus and this is a minus. So we would have m minus m, so these are going to cancel, and then a negative 1. So we'd have negative 1 over m plus 1 over m plus 1 over 2. You can combine steps if you're comfortable with that. Usually I try to simplify stuff first and then switch. Looks like on the handwritten stuff I did combine a little bit, so whatever you feel comfortable with. So again, this is our divide, so keep the top one the same, switch it to multiplication, flip the bottom, and then see what, and if anything simplifies. In this case, nothing simplifies. You can't cancel these because they're across from one another, so we just have negative 1 times 2 is negative 2 over m plus 1 times m plus 1 is m plus 1 squared. You do not have to write it all out and FOIL it or anything. You can just write it as m plus 1 squared. For this last one here, we have 1 over x squared minus 1 over y squared divided by 1 over x plus 1 over y. So again, get it as one fraction over another fraction first. So for our numerator, x squared y squared is the common denominator. So I'm going to multiply this side by y squared. And then I'll have to do this side by x squared. So I would have y squared minus x squared all over x squared y squared, or y squared x squared, however you want to write it, divided by, for our denominator, our common denominator is x times y, so this side I'll multiply by y, and this side I'll multiply by x. So I have y plus x over xy. So again, this means division, so I'm going to keep the top one the same. Switch to multiplication and flip the bottom. And then simplify what we can. So this is y squared minus x squared, so we need to factor it. So go back to those rules. It's a difference of squares, so you have y minus x times y plus x all over x squared y squared times, this one's already all done, you don't have to factor anything. And see what cancels. So I have a y plus x and a y plus x. I have an x here and an x squared here, so the x goes away and makes that an x to the first. 2 minus 1 is 1. I have a y and a y squared, so that goes away. So I'm left with, in the numerator, I have a y minus x, and in the denominator, I'm left with an x, y. So complex fractions are just division problems. They're just written as the fraction, and you just follow the same rules that we've been doing. And like I said, make sure you add and subtract first to make it a fraction over a fraction.